Grab your favorite alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage. Do not drink and drive. Relax and enjoy the latest episode of Why Complain When You Can Whine. Everything in this podcast is purely for psychoeducational and entertainment purposes only. Enjoy. Welcome to Why Complain When You Can Whine, making sense of the senseless. Join us as we attempt to make sense of toxic nonsense while drinking wine, or of course, whatever beverage of your choice. I tonight am drinking wine. I am drinking, this is called Honest Thief, because unlike what we're dealing with right now, this says it is from Paso Robles, California, 1850s Paso Robles, California. A time of gangsters, gamblers, and renegades who brought their own brand of justice to the region. None more curious than the honest thief, a woman of legend who used her infamous lover's ill-gotten gains to help those in need. Honest Thief is a tip of the hat to the maverick culture of early Paso Robles. It boasts notes of dark fruit, brown spice, and a dusting of toasted tobacco in a distinctly Paso Robles style. Discover her story at honestthief.com. I love that it's a woman, and I love that she's using ill-gotten gains to help people.
Yeah, that's great.
And my glass says, I am one glass away from saying something brilliant.
Well played. Well played, Jody. Well played. And I am drinking, what am I drinking? I'm drinking coffee. I'm still finishing my coffee. I know I'm terrible. I don't drink wine all that much. If I drink, people, if you've gotten to know me over these few podcasts that we've done together, it's more or less scotch. That is my go-to usually.
We've done over a year now.
Yeah, we've done a few. I know, I was being sarcastic. Anyways, I am a clinical therapist from Vancouver, BC.
Brianne.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't say your name.
Oh, I didn't say my name. Sorry. Brianne. Brie.
And see, we are just raw authentic. Actually, Ashley said that way back when, and I just love it. We're raw authentic. We're unscripted. We're unfiltered, and we don't care.
Yes, that's the beauty of this. Yeah. So what are we talking about today, Dr. Larman?
So today I like to read BuzzFeed for just like mind-numbing stuff. You know, when there's so much bullshit going on in the world right now, especially in the United States, I don't like always reading the news, and I like to read something that is just like what I call toilet reading, that you can read while you're sitting on the toilet. It doesn't take much concentration. And so on BuzzFeed, I found this article that says, it is so stressful to interact with them. 21 things that scream, I'm a narcissist, according to people that found out the hard way. And the reason I want to talk about this is because narcissist, that word narcissist and empath are thrown around. If you don't like somebody, they're a narcissist. If someone is an asshole, they're a narcissist. And if you have feelings, you're an empath.
Yes, no truer words have been spoken, and I'd say in the last 5 to 10 years, and particularly, especially in the last 5 years.
And so I wanted to talk about some of these things that scream narcissist to people, and how accurate are they? Because here's the thing. There are things that narcissists do that don't make them a narcissist. And there are things that narcissists do that people do.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you do it doesn't mean you're a narcissist. And just because a narcissist does it doesn't mean that that is the
defining factor.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not definitive. And you know what? I think, Jody, this is a really important topic to shed light on, because these terms are thrown around, and it can often be very confusing for people. And if you look at, the world of psychology and the human behavior, everything is spectrums, right? And so just because somebody does one thing that would be a definitive factor for somebody who's narcissistic or a narcissist doesn't necessarily mean that they're a narcissist. And learning to differentiate between the two is really important.
These are the things. We have the DSM for a reason. Now I know people hate the DSM. It is not perfect, but it's learning how to use the DSM that we learn in school, that we study for, that a layperson taking it off the shelf is not going to see it in the same way. Now, we can
No.
all have traits and tendencies at different periods of time, but
Yeah, of
it is
course.
when it is pervasive, it is part of you. Now, Bree, when you say everything's on a spectrum, I do want to clarify that because there are things where it's like you can have, like with the autism spectrum disorder, you can have a little, you can have a lot. You could be, they go from 1 to 4, I think it is. So high support needs, low support needs. So that's a spectrum of the disability
Mm-hmm.
being more disabling at the lower end of the spectrum.
Spectrum and then high functioning on the other end of the spectrum.
But when we're talking about like narcissistic personality disorder, because I've had people say, well, they're a little bit narcissist. And it's like, no, those kind of things you are or you are not.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, even with autism, if you are diagnosed, it's not a spectrum of being diagnosed. It's a spectrum of where you land on the
On the spectrum.
diagnosis
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
spectrum.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you still have to meet the criteria. Because I've heard people say, well, they're a little or they're a lot of NPD. It's like,
No, you
no,
can't have a personality disorder and be a little bit of a personality disorder. When they diagnose or when clinicians diagnose, it usually has to be moderate to severe for these characteristics and traits. And people can have narcissistic traits and not meet the criteria, therefore they don't have narcissistic personality disorder. But yes, they can have narcissistic traits. They can be showing narcissistic traits, but it won't be as pervasive and it
right.
won't be ruining all aspects or being funded where they can't function in everyday life or they have interpersonal relationship problems, which is the biggest one, holding jobs and yada, yada, yada.
And all of the disorders in the DSM have the caveat of it must cause distress in social or emotional or occupational type functioning. Now,
Hmm.
when it comes to personality disorders, it does not cause the person with the personality disorder distress.
No, it doesn't.
Narcissists
Other
hate
people distress.
themselves. They are
Yeah.
very self-loathing. They can't stand who they are. But that's not just if you ask them if they're distressed by it, they're not distressed by it. But it causes everybody around them distress.
Hmm.
They can't hold down jobs. It's always the job's fault. They can't.
That's where it's a delusion and it's distorted because again, like you said, it's not like having um, a psychosis disorder like schizophrenia, where they have to be on medication because they are hallucinating, they hear voices, auditory or physical, and then they don't keep jobs, word salad, paranoia. It's evident, and they know that, they're the issue. With MPD in
And it's
particular,
distressful to them.
it's distressful to them and to the people around them. And they can't function. To a narcissist, they continue to function, not realizing they're the problem. It's everybody else's problem. And they do have interpersonal relationship problems, but they don't see that
Not
they are the
them.
problem. They can, like you said, a job. They can't, oh, well, it's the job's fault. Let's just find another job. They don't realize that they are the common denominator, so they do have this is pervasive throughout their life. They just don't see it as being problematic. Whereas somebody with borderline personality, they're going to be like, I can't hold a job because I'm suicidal or I'm self-harming or I'm emotionally totally dysregulated. And they know they can't, and they can still blame. There's narcissism laced in there. They
Mhm.
can still blame and not take accountability, but they know that the pervasive problems that they have are them
But
versus
they're more distressed by the fact that they've been diagnosed with borderline,
yeah, I know.
the fact that they're borderline. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Hmm. Yep.
So, because with personality disorders, just like with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is
Hmm.
not anywhere near really OCD. Obsessive
No.
compulsive personality disorder is, if somebody's sitting there and they come into your house, when I go to doctor's office, I have a thing about things being level. If pictures are not level, and trust me, I know it looks like mine aren't, but they are. It's just the way the camera is because it bugs the. I will be in a doctor's office kind of going, I really, and sometimes I will get up and I will straighten their pictures. Now, it doesn't cause me distress to do that. It doesn't cause me distress to keep things clean. I don't have OCPD, I have what I call anal retentive personality disorder. It's like a step below OCPD. But other people around them get annoyed. Other people around them are like, "Oh my God, will you leave it alone?"
Mhm. Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily like if you ever watched the TV show Frasier back in I think the
Oh
90s.
God, I remember that show. Yeah.
Now his brother Niles was OCPD. He'd go to the to sit down somewhere and he'd have to wipe off the seat. He'd have to rearrange the silverware, and people would just look at him, and he's fine. Doesn't
Yeah.
bother him.
Yeah.
But everyone else around him is like,
Yeah. Sleeping with the Enemy. Remember that movie?
"Yep, yep." Where the towels.
Owls
Yep.
and the cans of food.
Now
Oh,
Monk. Have you ever watched Monk?
no.
Okay, Monk. He was a detective. He had OCPD and OCD.
Oh dear, that's a
Yeah.
bad combination.
The OCPD wasn't the bad part. The OCD was the bad part.
Well, because again, they're trying to find safety. That's cluster C. That's good. That's anxiety related. But back to the narcissism and these words empath and oh, they're such a narcissist, or they're, okay, they might have traits of narcissism, but you've got to be really careful that you're not using the term and throwing it around so loosely. And a lot of people, but then again, it can work in um it can work in the other way too, where people are very narcissistic or they are, but then everybody uses, oh, everybody throws that term around. It can be quite invalidating to people that have gone through this kind of abuse,
Yep. Oh
where,
yeah.
oh, everybody's a narcissist and everybody's this, and oh, I'm like, well, here's the deal. Now, if you look at the clinical data that's been retained over the years of personality disorder and diagnoses, they say it's about 1% of the population is like NPD that fits the criteria. Now, do you think Trump is a guy that goes out and seeks therapy? No. So why do you think narcissism is way more prevalent than what is in the literature and what is in the data is because nobody actively seeks therapy.
They go
That's
to therapy to
narcissistic.
prove everybody else is wrong.
Exactly. Or they've been forced to go due to like a court or
Yeah.
legally or
But
whatever.
even if
And then
they
they're
go to court,
diagnosed.
if they go
Yeah.
court ordered, it is the asshole that made me go.
Yes,
I didn't
exactly.
do anything.
But this is where all that research, so it drives me nuts when you get old school psychiatrists and old school psychologists that are like, oh my God, oh, this is so wrong. Everybody's saying everybody's a narcissist. It's only 1% of the population. Nobody knows what they're talking about. Okay, granted, they don't necessarily accept the fact that that 1% is super inaccurate.
It's now 1 to 6%.
It's 1 to
Up to
6%, but
6%.
I
Yeah.
still feel like that's still sort of inaccurate.
And I think now society is, how do I put this? Influencing a lot of people to be egocentric and to have narcissistic
Oh,
traits.
oh my God. It's getting worse and worse. You're right. You nailed it. So socioculturally, we are the most narcissistic on the planet. Western culture, so North America and Europe and Western culture, it's ingrained because if you look at all the different anthropology studies out there, we don't learn interpersonal development as infants and children. It's all independent. We're the only culture that doesn't sleep with our infants. And again, it builds this sense of inadequacy in the self. And then it's built on shame and self-indulgence and whereas other cultures that are, say, third world, and you look at South America in particular, it's family units. Everybody cares about everybody. You're part of a unit. It's not this individual, it's me, 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 me. It doesn't work that way. There was one study shown and done on a bunch of students and kids from, I would believe it was Guatemala, South America. They're outside super competitive on the basketball court and had no problem with friendly competition and winning and beating. But as soon as they got in the classroom, they didn't want to do better than their peers. They didn't want to academically outdo or be competitive with their peers. They felt terrible about somehow having to be better mentally and academically. It was wrong to them. And I found that to be so interesting because they learn what's healthy, what's acceptable, and what isn't. And you see, as North Americans and Western culture, we don't learn any of that shit. In fact, people they drive that in. You've got to be the best. You've got to be this. It's all about me, 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 you.
When I was in my internship, my pre-doc internship, my husband had just died. I had come from a very toxic workplace, and I was just not in the mood to be competitive or toxic or anything like that. And they were doing things at the internship, like someone was late, got marked off. When it came time for, what is it called, evaluations, not trying to brag, I'm just this is here. I got the highest evaluation and they got low. The other two got low. And then they wanted us to evaluate them. And I told the girls, I said, you know what, for one, I'm in a really bad place in my life, but we are not in competition. If one of us is going to be late, let's all go to the meeting late.
Mhm.
If they want us to evaluate them, let's evaluate them as a team so
Mhm.
that you don't feel like you're going to give them a better score, but they gave you a bad score, or
Mhm.
so you
Mhm.
feel inclined. Let's all do this as a team. And
Mhm.
we did that, and it was the best experience
Mhm.
because we were there to help each other out. I said, we are not in competition. We're all
Mhm.
going to finish this internship. We're all going
Mhm.
to go
Mhm.
off.
And that's the way it should be. We
That's
need to focus.
yes.
That's
It makes for
interpersonal
such a nicer, better communal camaraderie, all of that. Morale.
teamwork. That's the way we should as humans. What that
Yes.
there's the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Because that's the interpersonal development that those communities where, they're more poverty stricken and it's more third world, but they literally are family units that live together,
Mhm.
right? Parents don't raise children alone. It's grandparents, aunts, uncles, sisters, siblings, everybody. And everybody matters equally.
Yeah.
So,
And so
yes,
that's
you're right.
why, in our society now, there is like even we have a narcissistic NPD. We've already done this. Go back and watch a cluster B,
Milkshake.
clusterfuck as a
Hmm.
president
Hmm.
who has allowed and encouraged narcissistic type behavior. As long
Well,
as
look
it
at all the
doesn't
people
affect
that
him.
follow him.
Yeah. As
I
long as it
find
doesn't affect him.
everybody that follows Trump also is very narcissistic in thinking. Now, they may not be NPD diagnosable, but they're definitely, again, willful blindness, knowing what's right in front of them, but refusing to see it.
And also remember, egocentric, bragging about yourself, full of yourself, I'm the best, doesn't mean that you're a narcissistic personality disorder.
Hmm.
You could
That's
be
so
a
true.
blowhard. Like all you do is talk about yourself. My God. You're just egocentric. You're narcissistic, but you
Hmm.
are not
In one
NP.
aspect,
Yeah.
narcissistic in one aspect, but you don't meet the criteria for MPD again. Okay, so the
Okay.
criteria for personality disorder, the nine, you have to five out of the nine, right? And they can be all different, mostly with the empathy being a core feature that you don't
And
have.
exploitation.
And exploitation, yeah, and grandiosity can be internalized too, because you've got covert, you've got overt. Even though that's not distinguishable in the DSM, it is definitely something if you look within human behavior and characteristics.
Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that we learn to take those criteria and how do they manifest? What do
Yeah,
they look like? What are we looking for when it says this?
yeah.
Because it looks different in different people.
Yes, people, here's the thing. It's like somebody with autism, okay? If you look at one person with autism, you see one person with autism, the next person is not going to show the same. We're all individual. That's what, again, this is where it gets a bit complex. So what's the list that they
Okay.
have?
So the first one is inability to take accountability or apologize for actions or behaviors. That is part of being narcissistic.
Mhm.
But that does not make you narcissistic. So if you have someone who doesn't take accountability or apologize for their actions, they're not automatically a
No,
narcissist.
that's one feature.
And it says, why would anybody apologize? Why would he apologize when he hasn't done anything wrong? And even if he has done it, the other person deserves it. So that is exactly what narcissists do. If I did something, which I didn't do, but if I did, you made me do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the only reason I did it
Yeah.
because of you.
Yeah. So if you look at the personality spectrum, you've got one end of the spectrum, which is neurotic, it's neurosis, which is actually considered more neurotypical, believe it or not. Sounds funny. And this is sort of based on Otto Kernberg's theory, is that neurosis and neuroticism is sort of more of the I'm at fault for everything. Even though you're not, I'm me, I'm the problem, blah, 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 blah. And then you go to the other end of the spectrum, it's your fault, you made me do it. No accountability, not blaming, nothing. The whole idea is to be somewhere in the middle.
And it says it's also normal.
Mhm.
Everybody else does it. You should get used to it, or you won't be able to keep anyone around. It does happen So if you are with someone, and I know when we go out on dates and we look for red flags, and if someone says, "Well, I didn't do that," you're like, "Red flag." It's like it's gonna happen sometimes. It's a pervasive pattern that meets with other things. I'm not saying you should stay with someone if they do that. I'm
Mhm.
saying that does not, in and of itself, make them a narcissist. NPD narcissist. Whenever they talk, they're either inflating their self image and building themselves up or putting another person down and making fun of them. And it can be subtle. Yeah, I mean, I see that. It says, I know someone whose entire identity is humble bragging about their accomplishments. They do it to subtly compete with the people around them. It's so stressful to interact with them because it's like everything I say, they admit this weird, airy laugh and then one up me by telling me they've done that thing. And not only have they been doing that thing longer than me, but they are the best at it.
Mhm.
Anytime you share an achievement, they redirect the conversation to themselves and their good
Mhm.
fortune every time.
Mhm. That's quite
Histrionic.
egotistical. That's histrionic and very, very, very egotistical. It's about their ego.
Histrionic does that. Oh my God. I know someone who's histrionic, and I swear
We don't talk
every
much about histrionic
time.
though anymore. I feel like histrionic is going to be a disorder of the past at some point.
Well, they wanted to get rid of in the DSM-5,
I
they
know.
took out NPD because psychiatrists that said it's not around anymore. But practicing clinicians said, the fuck it isn't. And
Yeah.
so they left it in. But yeah, histrionic, you don't hear about that much. And histrionic, honestly, the
I feel
people
like
that I know,
it's a very combo with NPD and
yeah.
BPD. Usually you find that histrionic is very much in there
But the
with
people that I know two people that are diagnosable histrionic. They're just annoying. They're just annoying. They're
yeah.
not, in my opinion, and I've known one for a long time and one for about 10 years.
Mhm.
And they're just annoying.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that well, they might have a hard time with maintaining friendships and relationships and work
They do.
because a lot of the time their behavior can be over sexualized towards people that they think are closer than they really are. And they have to be the center of attention. So everybody gets annoyed being around them. They're like, oh, it's the so-and-so show again. Because you can't have a conversation without them getting super uncomfortable because they need to be the spotlight all the
And
time.
they do have trouble, like at work sometimes, because it'll
They
be
do.
like, oh my God, that person looked at me wrong. Oh,
Mhm.
I was just doing my job and this is what they did. And it's like,
There's so, like again, cluster Bs are the dramatic personality disorders, but histrionic takes it to a new level.
oh
Hi,
yeah.
Amber Heard.
Yeah. Yep. Um, demanding rather than asking, and then being appalled and enraged when the person they're demanding something from doesn't cave. It's wild that a full-grown adult will expect everything to be catered to them. What do you think of that
You know
one?
what? That would fall under the characteristic of haughtiness and rude, I think, and just arrogant. Like,
Yeah.
I'm demanding, I'm arrogant, I'm superior
Entitled.
to you and entitled. So that would fall under one of the traits of NPD, which is the arrogance, the glibness, the real like I don't I'm owed, I'm entitled. I'm yeah.
However, there are a lot of people that are entitled that are not NPD.
hmm
There
Again, you
are,
have to fit five of the nine criteria. So if we list the nine criteria, you have to fit five of those to be full-blown NPD.
yeah.
But if you had four, I would say you're a highly narcissistic person, but you're not necessarily full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. And this is where the DSM sucks because it is a classification system and it's so boxy. It's like you got to be in that box, otherwise you're not. But if you look at humans, we're not really meant to be in a box.
Mhm.
It's different for every single person.
But you also have to weed out okay, wait a minute. Are they just entitled? Like, just because that's what everybody uses, that Karen that just pinched a fit in Costco and laid down on the floor saying, I am not going to wear a mask during
Mhm,
COVID.
mhm.
That's demanding and being appalled and enraged
And
when they,
entitled
yeah.
and arrogant, but it
But
doesn't
that
make you a
doesn't,
narcissist. No.
thank you, but that doesn't mean. So
Okay.
again, when you're reading these things, and I get it, it's Reddit or, it's BuzzFeed and they took it from Reddit and everything. But I'm just saying, be cautious in all seriousness because you read these things and go, that's so and so. They're a narcissist.
I
No.
know. I love it when you're dealing with BPD and they're like, oh my God, they're such a narcissist. They're such a narcissist. And yet the person you're talking to is both narcissistic and borderline, and they don't see anything within what they're
Any
talking
of
about. I have a few clients that are like that.
it.
They're
This
awesome
one,
and they
this one,
don't see their own narcissism.
this one I do agree with. They feel more like a black hole than a person. I have described narcissists as black holes. They feel more like a black hole than a person. Doesn't really matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. If I catch myself feeling like I'm walking on eggshells or tiptoeing around someone almost in all the time in order to avoid an interaction feeling ruined, it's usually a good sign I should put some distance in.
Yeah.
That one, now I'm not saying that someone is, again, these you've got to have 5 of these things, but if you are with someone and you literally feel the energy just sucked out of you, we have, and I believe this, we're made of energy, right? And we have auras, if you will. They talk about auras that we have. If you ever feel your energy just being pulled, have you
Yeah.
ever been drained just talking?
Emotional vampires, narcissists and
Yes.
borderlines are emotional vampires.
And no matter what, it's a black hole. You can never fill that hole.
No, you can't because
Can't.
again, everything is built on shame and they're looking for constant external validation to fill them up. Why do you think when you look at the traits, diagnosable traits of narcissistic personality disorder, it's always about protecting that fragile ego and filling up. And that's why they exploit. That's why they extort. That's why they use. That's why they play. That's why everything is to serve their purpose. And they use people like objects. That's the whole, they're cheating all the time, infidelity. They're filling up the black hole that will never be filled.
Which exactly, it will never be filled. If you
It's a
go on
never-ending
some of my
vortex.
early
Yep.
TikTok videos, I put it is like a black hole. You
Mhm.
can never fill it up, no
Nope.
matter what you do, no matter how much you try. So to me, this one is a big red flag one. Whereas the other ones are like, you got to be careful and they've got to add into the other ones. If
Well,
you, what?
yes, or the other ones that you were mentioning, they all go towards the traits of NPD, but the
Yeah,
black hole, this is not something that you can find in the DSM. It's just again understanding why the person who may be diagnosable as a narcissist and where it all stems from, because it's a broken, fractured sense of self. And there is nothing there. They constantly suck. It's like a vampire sucking blood out of you to survive.
yeah.
That's what what
They're
a narcissist
they're
does.
sucking your
They're
soul.
sucking your
They are.
soul and all of your traits and all of your this and everything for their own needs because they don't know how to give themselves that.
And like it says, if I catch myself feeling like I'm walking on eggshells or tiptoeing around someone almost all the time in order to avoid an interaction feeling ruined. All of you who have been in a diagnosable NPD relationship, how many of you can relate to that? You're probably all raising your hand right now. That is a huge thing with NPD. So all of these other ones that I've been reading, they kind of go with, and you might not be. I don't know anyone who I have ever met that has been a fucking black hole and sucked my energy and I have to tiptoe around them.
Hmm.
That wasn't.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe they're out there. I don't know how they're dealing, but the next one is they take offense when you do or say or even enjoy something they don't like. I'm talking specifically about a narcissistic parent. You must live your life the way they envision for you, and if you don't, you are punished, belittled, and ignored. Yes, this was one of the craziest things I've experienced with a narcissistic family member. There's a hobby I like doing, and she didn't like that I did it and kept trying to talk me out of doing it anymore. Funny thing is, some other family members did the same, something very similar to it. As far as I know, she didn't bother them about it. If she did, I didn't hear anything. Why is it okay for other people, including family members, to do it, but not me? Makes no fucking sense and it pisses me off. See, a narcissist though wouldn't like anybody doing it.
Hmm.
So that one kind of confuses me. What about you?
Well, if it's taking away the attention from the narcissist, and
But
it's
other
a
people
follow.
are doing it and they're not bothered by it. Only this
But
one
it's not
person.
affecting them. Somehow it's not affecting them. If other people are doing it and it's the narcissist isn't looking for something from that person, then it won't bother them. No. But it's in that dynamic, this if you're talking about a parental, like a parent relationship with a child, it's a control thing. Narcissists have to be in control all the time. So if it's a child, yeah, you've got to keep control of your children. Other people don't affect them. They're not gaining if it's not affecting them and they're not doing it with other people, it's because they're not looking for control from those people.
This is because it doesn't say who the other family members are. It says some other family members. So if they're distant, like cousins or siblings or whatever, not children, but
Mm.
if they are other kids or whatever, then that's just an issue between that child and that parent. Not the child's fault, not saying that. But there are parents who aren't narcissistic that will pick a golden child.
Yeah, they will, but how abusive is it? I would say it would be the question. I mean, if they're not doing it to the other kids, I mean, that child's the scapegoat, clearly. And the other child is maybe the golden child, but all narcissistic parents do that. My mother did that. It was terrible.
Mhm.
I was horrible, and my sister could do no wrong.
I've seen it where someone was a scapegoat and then it flipped, and the scapegoat became the golden child, and the golden child became the scapegoat. And
Yeah,
then every so often it would flip again. It all depended on what the kids did. It was
wow.
it was like I felt for those kids.
Oh, I
I
think
felt
it's the intention behind it and the person and what they've learned these maladaptive coping strategies to get their needs met. And again, if you're looking at a narcissist, it's always about bending everything around to get their needs met at the expense and the mental health of everybody around them. So if you look at the behavior of people that are on the toxic side of things, okay, maybe not diagnosable NPD, but you're looking at the way that they manipulate, the way that they shift, it's because it does something. It's to keep everybody off balance. That's covert,
yeah.
right? It's not maybe textbook, but it's covert. So, yeah, I just think that again with NPD in particular, pervasive in all areas of the life in their life, but they can put that mask onto everybody else to trick everybody to think they're so great to
Oh,
everyone around them, but to that behind
100%.
closed doors and that person, it is about making that person feel small, inferior, to make them feel powerful, in control, and they're somehow gaining something from that particular child.
This goes with the next one. Narcissistic people are almost always very charming in public. So, not easy to spot unless you live with one. Then it says, yes, but if you've been around enough such people, it becomes a little easier to spot. The strangely intense eye contact, the insincere praise, the way so many responses seem tailored to you rather than authentic expressions of their personal self, like spotting a sales pitch, basically. You've been in the business for long, you know when you're being pitched, even subtly, backhandedly in a long game. The more that you know, the more you can spot.
Yeah, it's true. And you'll
Oh,
know
oh.
genuine, authentic complementing behavior or complementary behavior versus the superficial charm and the love bombing and everything and blah 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 blah. I like it is so evident. You can walk into a bar and you know the guy that's on instantly like gawking at you and comes over and he's like, "Wow, you're the most blah 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 ever." I'm like, "Yeah, see you later, dude. Fucking get out of here." You just know.
So interesting to me that my one of my very first clients in my internship was narcissistic personality disorder. And I had him and his wife, my colleague had his wife. And I remember, I think I've said this before, we had a two-way mirror. My supervisor's office was on the other side of mine. And whenever we had sessions, they would all cram into her office to watch the sessions
Yeah.
because it was so mind-boggling. Like,
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
fuck?
It is.
And so I saw it from that angle.
Mhm.
Then when I was with my ex, I saw like the wife's angle. I saw it from a whole different perspective and I learned so much more.
Mhm.
And then when I had the supervisor and the lead psychologist and all these people, that it was as soon as you hear or see, there's just something that you're like, here we
Mhm.
go. Here we go. I don't
Mhm.
want to be on this roller coaster ever
Mhm.
again. You can see it. You can see it. And that's the thing too, is that's why when you're, and I'm not saying it's only mental health professionals, because people that have been in relationships, but when you're a mental health professional who has been in the relationship,
Mhm.
it's like, how did I
It's
not see
the
that before?
radar is there. And you know what? But I've even had clients and I've talked to other psychologists that have been duped by the most covert narcissists out there. And they're like, how did this happen? I'm a psychologist. I'm like, because they can lie and the mask is on. And
Uh-huh.
unless you are really around it all the time, I mean, people are people.
But
And
once you notice, like I've had clients where I'm like, I had a couple and I'm watching their interaction and I'm just like, and
mm,
when one spouse was gone, I said to the other one, no, she said to me that she thinks he's narcissist. And I'm like, I was picking up on that, but I had only seen them in session. So she was telling me some of the behaviors. I'm like, yep, because you can when you've been around it enough. Now, there's also that caveat you have to beware, because sometimes they're just gray flags and they're nothing, but we're so sensitive and desensitized.
well, and that's just where it's tricky. And the thing is that they will lie. They will lie to the therapist all day long. My ex did that. He's like, oh, I went to the therapist and, he was really like, I need to be easy on myself. And I always try to self-sabotage. And I'm like this. And I'm like, but did you tell him that you were sleeping with like 10 people at the time? He's like, well, no. I'm like, no, you lied to him. So how is he supposed to help you if you lied to him? He doesn't really know who you are. And he can only believe you with what you're telling him. He can only go by with what you're saying,
Yep.
unless he gets to know you long enough and well enough to know that you're lying to him. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's why I asked this, the wife was and she told me some more things. I'm like, okay. So what I was seeing. But yeah, you only, when they're on their best behavior, first couple of sessions, but after that, if you've been there, you can start picking up on things and you can start asking the questions that are going to get the answers that you're looking for. I'm not saying it's perfect, but if you've never, like, if I only knew from doing therapy, I would miss it a lot.
Mhm.
But because I've been through business and personal,
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
I, oh, there's a certain things that you're like, the hairs kind of start to stand up.
Hmm.
They never ask anyone a single question, just endless monologue. That can be anybody, not just a narcissist. But I remember telling my sister when she met my ex, I said I think he's a little Asperger's, so he's gonna sit and talk about himself the whole time. He's gonna get on this rant and he's just gonna go. Just letting you know that. And he might still be, I think he might have some Asperger's in him. But yeah, once
Hmm.
they can talk about themselves all night.
Hmm. Yep, they don't know how to have a necessarily a two-way conversation.
They don't care about you.
No.
They don't want to know about you because they don't care about you.
Well, they ask in the beginning to hook you.
That's
They
the
ask
only
if they
reason. That's
care.
the only time they're actually listening,
Mask.
is so
Hmm.
that they can grab you in.
Exactly. And then it starts to fall, and then everything revolves around what they need from you.
Not being able to take the slightest form of criticism, or to be more specific, they interpret honest, constructive criticism as a personal attack. Again, there are a lot of people that are like that.
Yeah, there are. And sensitivity to criticism. I mean, uh, I would look at my past relationship and the odd piece of whatever that I would, he was an actor, so he was used to getting critiqued. So he didn't always take things so personally or offensively.
Or at
Like
least
he's
let
an
you see it.
ex-model. So
Or
yeah, so the ex-model thing, like he was used to being picked apart. So if you did that with him with a whatever, he'd be like, "Oh, okay." Like he didn't take it personally. I think it was just again his lack of and then because he had no empathy, like none. Um, it- if you directly insulted him, like said, often he would say things that were just, I'm like, you need to go hang out with Trump. He's not smart. And some of the shit that would come out of his mouth, and I'd be like, okay, you didn't just really say that out loud. And my reaction to things, he's like, yeah, I know, I'm so dumb. Like that would offend him, right? So he wouldn't take that lightly. But if I ever said something about a picture or whatever, he's weird that way. He wasn't overly sensitive to that.
And the ones that I know, like my ex, he would take criticism, but not inside. You know what I mean? If you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Steve was like that. Yeah,
But you could
I know.
tell that inside they're like cursing you out and thinking that you're the dumb, but they can't say that.
No, they can't. Well, they can't admit that they're offended by it. Like there's a
Right.
part of it, again, their pride and their ego can't show that they're so morbidly offended, especially when they're ones that are constantly critiquing everybody else all the time.
My ex used to say shit about everybody. Oh,
Hmm.
because he was the number one in seniority at the entire prison. So
Hmm.
everyone underneath him was rookie, stupid, didn't know what he knew. And whenever they made a mistake, anyone made a mistake, especially a new person, oh my God, when my ex have shit to say about it.
Hmm.
Well, one day he did something. He slipped with his pepper spray and ended up Oompa Looping because it's orange, Oompa Looping two of his partners completely covered in pepper spray.
Oops.
Yeah. And everybody in the whole institution, because that is worse than a rookie move.
Right.
And so I think about it today and it brings me joy because I remember saying to him, you really did that? Mister, I'm number one. You pepper sprayed your partners. And he's like, well, my hand slipped. And I'm like, but that's a rookie move. And I was doing it on purpose because we had already split up at this point and I knew it would affect him. But I know now that it probably was like more of a dagger to the heart. Like, how dare you call me a rookie? How dare you say? And I'm like, the whole institution, dude, I've heard about it from so many people. And it was like, they're just
They
stupid.
twisted the knife.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it.
my ex-husband, he was super sensitive. You couldn't critique, like he would take everything like it was insane. He'd directly insult you and then you try to dish it out and he couldn't take it. And then you were the meanest, most horrible person in the world. And how could you say that?
Very, so mean.
Yeah.
Someone who vents everything about their life but cannot provide the smallest ounce of support. This person said a former friend was like this. Everything was drama for them, even the tiniest things. It was actually very draining to have to listen to. And you're right. This person showed zero support for others a majority of the time. Classic narcissistic traits. That's not a classic narcissistic trait.
No, because I have a really good friend of mine. I would say she exhibits more
Yeah.
dependency, borderline type behavior, but she is an emotional vampire. So, like she will drain you and talk about all blah 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 blah, and then she only calls you when she's got problems. But she's the sweetest person in the world, and she wants to do, but she's just
Histrionic does
self.
that.
But what's that?
Histrionic does that.
Yeah, yeah, and very self-focused, and they don't realize that because everything they're so in their head all the time, they don't realize that they haven't said, "Oh, hey, how are you?" I never get it. She'll call and she'll just start going right into her problems, and it's not even a hi, how are you? And then, but if I ever had an issue, she would listen to me for sure and show, but it's always everything is always drama, everything is always like again, right? And not recognizing, not seeing that you know, they can be like that. I wouldn't necessarily say that, yes, narcissistic people can do that. Narcissists can, but it's not a defining trait of narcissism. No.
My ex called me up at 2 in the morning one time though. He's like, "Oh my God, you would not believe what just happened." I'm like, "Oh, what?" And he's like, "This when I was working and he pulled a gun. Oh, I gotta go. I'm tired. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Click. I'm like, "What the fuck? I don't know what just happened." Well, I think his supply that he was with walked in on him and he had to go or something.
Oh, that would make sense. Okay. I was like,
But
that
I was just like,
I don't know
you
what that's
called me
going
up
on
for something so amazingly, I won't believe this.
at 2 a.m. and then click, gotta
And
go.
then
Yeah, no,
click.
that we
Yeah.
probably.
Like, I guess I gotta wait till tomorrow to find out. Okay. Um, you're either 100% with them, or you're the worst person who ever lived and are responsible for all of their misery. Darvo.
I'd say that's more
But
a dichotomy of idolization and devaluation.
I mean, there are people who are not narcissists, NPDs, that you are with me or you're not. But when you think about someone like Trump, you're a rhino as soon as you turn against him.
Hmm.
Republican in name only.
Hmm.
Um, if you're not 100% with Trump, then he wants nothing to do with you. I don't know though. I don't, I'm trying to think if I've come across that with, I don't, what have you?
With a narcissist, and
Yeah.
whether or not you're 100% with them or you're not,
Or
they're
you're
kind of
responsible for all their misery.
all their misery. I think you become responsible for all their misery in the end anyway. It's like in the
No
beginning,
matter
it's that
what, yeah.
idolization and that devaluation. So I find more with BPD, you'll find the idolize, 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 and then all of a sudden they hate you the next minute. And then they love you again, and then they hate you.
Yeah.
And it's that I hate you, don't leave me, I hate you, don't leave me, push, pull, push, pull. Because it's the splitting, it's the dichotomous thinking black and white. And they're so offended, they're so slighted, they're everything they take so personally, or they completely distort. But with narcissism, you see a lot of the same, again, a lot of overlapping behavior. But the idolization in the beginning is they put you on this pedestal, right? And then all of a sudden, you come off the pedestal because there's nobody that can be on it. We're not perfect, but they have this fantasy in their brain of what they want and what they have in their brain. And then you're there for a little while until they get to know you, and then they're like, oh, I didn't like that. And they get the ick, and then all of a sudden they start to devalue. And then, you just turn into the
Also,
worst person in the world.
because that idolized person is, for example, when I was 6 years old, that's when this all started. I was not given love. Everybody else was. I was basically emotionally abandoned in my mind, real or perceived. If it's perceived to them, it's real. And so that's what they're looking for.
Mhm.
So anybody that's put on a pedestal can't be that 6-year-old or 4-year-old or 8-year-old's
No,
person. So
no,
you're never
no,
going to fulfill
no.
what they're looking for
No,
ever.
because they don't know what real is. They have this vision and it's fantasy in their brain. And this is where a lot of the times when you're with somebody that's toxic or with any sort of significant traits of a cluster B personality disorder, they they always go to they create these images and these fantasies, and they're it's unattainable. And then all of a sudden you don't feel that you do in the beginning because it's a fantasy, it's not real. And then all of a sudden it slips because you're human, and then they lose all interest. And again, they are looking for you to fill them up. So I often have this conversation with again, I need these people to love me, love me, love me, but they have no idea how they feel about the person. They don't even know if they love the person.
And they
And
don't
I,
know what love feels
no,
like either. They're trying
no.
to feel something.
Mhm. But you can't feel anything unless you really do have a good sense of self and identity and love yourself. If you are constantly externalizing and seeking admiration and attention from everybody else, then how can you love another person if you don't know how to do it, if you don't know how to give it to yourself? You're not going to. It doesn't mean that you have to love yourself. It means that you have to have a healthy enough level of your own narcissism, which means your ego and your sense of self and worth and esteem, that you are not constantly relying on external forces and external circumstances consistently to feel something. You can't give if you don't have anything to give to yourself.
And you don't know what you're receiving because you don't know what it feels like.
No.
Because love right now, as a 45-year-old, I'm looking for the love that I didn't get as a 6 and a 5 and a 4-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't feel the same way. So it's not filling that need. So that's
No.
another thing. You're trying to fill a need that from 40 years ago or whatever that
That
you
didn't
don't
exist.
even
I'll
know
use
what
myself as an example in that. Okay. So my parents were not only like my dad just emotionally not there and just absent and away. My parents were married. Um, but my mom was really mentally unstable emotionally and like she was very borderline narcissistic. She would be considered both. And highly abusive. But neither of my parents would show affection. So there was no love, no hugs, no nothing. And obviously, there's just abuse from my mom. So what did that 5-year-old not get? She didn't get the affection. She didn't get the hug. She didn't get the love. So what did she crave growing up? I need somebody to love me. I need somebody to show me the affection. I need somebody to do these things. The last boyfriend I had, or the last partner I had, he figured that out pretty quick. The forehead kisses, the innocent love, the cuddling, the affection, the things, and that my husband didn't do at all. Like again, avoidant. He that made him uncomfortable. So that was his intermittent reinforcement in the relationship. He would play that every time, and he spoke right to the 5-year-old. Which it's not to say that you can't get that in an adult relationship, and it's not to say that that's not important as part of having affection in a relationship, but it is definitely only one small factor piece, right? But narcissists learn this kind of behavior. They learn exactly the things that you didn't receive.
Yeah. Yeah. The only time a narcissist will truly listen to you
Mhm.
is when you first meet them.
Well,
And
that's because they're studying you. They
yeah.
have to learn how they can manipulate you and how to love bomb you and exactly how to speak your language, right?
Yep.
They do that. And again, it's all for their own gain. It's all used to be able to manipulate you in the end. But this whole fantasy that they're so, you're my soulmate, you're my this, you're my that, and they seem genuine in the beginning is because this is the fantasy that they have in their own brain about what they want. They're in love with the idea of love. They have no idea what love really looks like or how to feel it or how to give it appropriately. They're just constantly seeking people to love them. I'll never forget my ex-husband saying to my kids when he got engaged to his new wife that I will never find anybody that loves me more than her. Not how much he loved her, how much she loves him. It was like, I will never find a person like so and so, I won't use her name, that will ever love me as much as she loves me. Not how much he loved her, or she loves me and I love her. It was all about how much she could love him. Ding, 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 ding.
What's really interesting, I can't even imagine. I would love to for maybe 5 minutes, but I'd be too terrified that I would never come out to be inside like my ex's head
Hmm.
to see literally, I can't even imagine how awful it probably feels. Now, I have no sympathy for narcissists. Don't for NPD, not at all. No, I am not one of those people that thinks they're poor, misunderstood, on and on and on. Sorry, but no. But I would love to be inside his head for just like 5 minutes.
A lot of self-loathing and a lot of hatred buried in there, and
Oh,
the insecurity is so
big
incessantly high.
time.
And that's what they're so fearful of how people see them and how they look, but they do have this altered, obscene, high thinking of themselves. Like they think they have to convince themselves. And when I think of my ex-husband, that's exactly what I think of. He's just so thinks he's whatever, but then you know the level of insecurity that's behind all of that. But I have to say, in their brain, all they're thinking is what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? How can I get more of this? How can I get more money?
How can
Who
this
can I
person
play?
bring
Who can
me
I use? Who can I whatever in order to make me richer, more successful, more powerful, more attractive?
in other words, happier? I am
In what they
not
consider
happy.
happier. Yeah,
I'm
I'm not
not
happy.
happy.
I need to use extort to get all these things because I am not happy as is. It's not enough. It's never enough.
I think about my ex because I'm like, well, he has friends because NPDs really don't have lifelong friends. And he's had lifelong friends. And then I realized, oh my God, they only see each other like once or twice a year. And they're drunk off their asses when they're together.
Okay, this is so on point because I just learned, as we talked a little while ago, in my past relationship, has moved on to what his so-called best friend, sister. like what the actual whatever. Anyway, that's aside from the point. Knowing his so-called best friend and his fiance, where every time I've talked to her, she's like, they are not best friends. Like, I don't know why you keep coming back and saying that, so her fiance and this guy are like best friends. She's like, no, he's like a bro. Like, he's like the guy, like, they go out and get wasted and go to the bar and there's locker room talk, but there's no intimate, deep, soulful connection here. Yet, the whole time we were together, he portrayed this person as his be all and end all best friend growing up. Like, they're just that's his, but even his brother was like, you better not diss that guy because that's, so my ex,
Yeah.
that's his best friend. But when I talked to her and I'm like, there it is. There is the histrionic part of NPD where they think they're closer to people than they really are because they have superficial connections that they think are deeper because they don't have deep connections with people. And it was like, and this was just a couple months ago. So the light bulb went off again and I went, oh my God, there it is. He
Yeah.
thinks he's got these deep, intense, really, and then he's latched onto the other guy that wasn't his best friend and is now showing the world that bros for life. I'm like, oh, because you lost your other one that apparently you were really good friends with, but you're actually not really good friends with.
Yeah. My ex has about four. And it was like whenever I never met them, my son met them. I've not met them, but I've talked to them on the phone at different times. And whenever they were together, seriously, I kid you not, drunk off their fucking asses.
Yep. And
Like,
that's it. They're just party. These are party
yes,
friends. They don't have close friends because they don't have empathy. And they use people. They can't build close connections. They don't know how.
no, it is very superficial. What can you do for me? These
Yes. What
different
can you do for
pros.
me?
And
Again,
also, like NPDs, this was one thing that kind of tripped me up until I realized this is where you can't go strictly by the book. NPDs don't like to be alone. They don't like to be alone because what happens when you're alone? You're in
they
your
get,
head.
yeah, they
Okay?
can't do
They don't
that.
want to be in their head. My
No,
ex used to say, "Oh my God, I'm home alone. I have nothing to do. This is amazing." But what
lying.
was he doing? Getting high and making a cocktail. He's like,
Yep.
I just took an edible and I just made cocktails. And I'm like, wait a minute. Every, every, I kid you not, every time you are alone, you're drunk and high. You're
Yep.
drinking and getting high.
He can't be unmedicated in a
Can't be
way. He had
alone
to be altered in some way because they can't be alone. That's why a lot of them have addiction issues. And they're always cheating and they're always with, and as soon as they break up, they're on to the next love of their life because they can't be alone.
because they
They can't.
can't be in their self-loathing head.
No, no, they're self-loathing head because that's exactly it. Narcissism is built on shame. It's a shame disorder. It's all cluster Bs are shame-based disorders.
Yeah.
They all are shame-based disorders. And so again, it's a fractured sense of self. Now, if I look at myself, okay, so typically counselors and therapy that we're high on the empath. We're on the other end of the spectrum. We're more on the neurotic end of the spectrum where it's like we wear our I don't want to say dysfunction on our sleeve, but we're far more open about the fact that um, we've been hurt or we see our own stuff or we can self-reflect and we can do those things to a fault. Where if you're, oh, I'm an empath and I have feelings, is like, okay, empathy and high empathy comes from usually trauma. It actually, you feel because you're so acute to everybody around you and their feelings. It's almost like a superpower, but it kind of works against you. And you'll wind up with the narcissist because both of you are trying to get to sort of the middle of the spectrum. One is that the empath or the codependent or the fawner will 120% self-sacrifice in order to be loved by the avoidant or the narcissistic abuser, and they will constantly sell themselves out. They don't protect themselves. There's no self-protection. Where the narcissist protects himself at all costs and extorts and uses in order to protect the fragile self. Whereas the empath, or I'd say the codependent, doesn't do that at all. They will constantly betray themselves, sell themselves out in order to love the person who's not capable of loving them. It's why the empath and the narcissist always wind up together.
I have to because you keep saying codependent. nothing wrong, nothing with what you said. It just reminds me of someone who
Yes.
used to talk about codependency all the time
Yes.
and used it wrong all the time. That I
Yes.
just feel compelled to say this for anybody. If you've ever
Yes.
been called codependent, it is relationship specific, not
Yes.
person specific.
Yes. It's relationship specific, not person specific, very much. Otherwise, you'd
Just
be have dependent personality
because
disorder.
of a narcissist that we know.
Yes.
I have to say that.
Yes. 120%. Where narcissists, again, they mirror, they learn, and then they use all of the terminology in the wrong way. Like the wrong way. I loved one video where he's like, "Oh, I want to collaborate." And then he was talking about something about the brain chemistry of a narcissist and what happens with the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And I'm like,
That's the one that I
"You
did. And I said, my
are
guy.
wrong. That is not correct." So wrong. So again,
And
yeah.
I have to say, he had the audacity to message me back and say, I just took what you said and changed it around.
Yeah, well, you can't do that because you're
I'm like,
one's based on science and one is based on your delusions.
takes a
Yeah, you can't. No.
and twist it to become an opinion.
Yeah. So,
Anyways,
yes. And then feelings, here's another thing too, right? Feelings, compassion, sympathy is not empathy. It's not. They're different. You can be compassionate, you can be sympathetic to a person's situation. An empathetic person or somebody who's high empathy can literally take themselves and put them in the shoes of the person experiencing what they're experiencing. But it's still limited. I can never empathize completely with the Indigenous community around me because I've never suffered generational trauma. I'm not Indigenous. So, how can I really, really know how they feel? Prisoners of war. Can I truly empathize? I can have ample amounts of compassion and sympathy, and I can put myself in the shoes and make me feel sick of how they've been treated. But can I really, truly know how they feel? No. So,
that's why, sorry,
that's empathy. No, that's okay. That's empathy.
but that's why I try to say to people, I can understand how you feel. I
Hmm.
don't know how you feel. I can understand you feeling that way,
Hmm.
but I don't
Hmm.
know because I am not you. So
No,
I
well,
don't feel the
again,
same
but
way.
that's just it. You
But
have
yeah,
to be able to know, and empathy really is you can put yourself in the shoes of another person. And, but truly, this is why group therapy for people of prisoner of war and tragedy and trauma and different things was so good, is because they were able to relate to each other.
yeah,
And, even as a therapist who is high empathy, highly compassionate, because we're trained to, and we are just those people, is great. It still doesn't necessarily help as much as it does to people. That's why I work in trauma and I work with narcissistic abuse because I can feel and I know exactly how they're feeling. Not understand, I know how they're feeling because I've been there and you've been there. So when
yeah,
you get a person who has undergone narcissistic abuse, you've been with a narcissist. You know exactly what they are feeling and the cognitive dissonance and the second guessing, and you're going, yep, been there, yep, been there.
yep.
So this is why you build these relationships and why you can work with people when you experience what they've experienced.
And I want to say, you don't have to, as a clinician, you don't have to have been through everything that your clients have been through.
No, 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 absolutely not. No, that's
However, this
impossible.
is one of the things where I get so angry at social media and stuff where they say, oh, narcissistic abuse, that's not real. It's not real. No, it literally changes your brain. It
Yep,
changes your prefrontal cortex, your hippocampus,
your
and
amygdala.
your amygdala. It does. And
Yep.
to understand, I honestly, until I've been through it, again, I've worked with narcissistic clients, but until being through it, now I work with victims and I tell them, they'll be like, I, and I'm like, I totally get what you're saying. However, because it's like, I've been there. I know what they're saying. I know the whole, but he, but she, and it's like, it's called mind fucking and gaslighting, and you're doubting yourself.
Well, and this is the victim. This is again when you can see the brain damage within people who have had narcissistic abuse, because you'll have to go back and we have to go over the same stuff over and over and over again
And
because the
we've
cognitive
been
dissonance is so strong
through it.
and we've been through it and the brain damage. And every time you doubt yourself and you go, oh, I thought I was okay. And then all of a sudden now I've learned this. And now you're going back and you're second guessing and you're doubting because again, they suck you dry. You lose your identity, you lose your sense of self, you lose everything. And it does damage the hippocampus, which is where you store memory, your prefrontal cortex, which is your executive function and decision making, your amygdala, which is your
Fight or flight.
your fight or flight, and hypervigilance. It's why you wind up with autoimmune disorders or you can get illnesses because your body's in a state of constant crisis. It's always fleeing. It's always got cortisol. It always has adrenaline. It always has norepinephrine running through it. We're not meant to be that way all the time. It's the most prehistoric part of the brain, and we don't need it anymore. Nobody's being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, but
Right.
our brains can't differentiate the difference between that and missing the bus. And so you'll still get the same hormones being released in the brain through the body, which tends to get you to want to jump up and run.
And in
And
short term, again, back when we were running for our dinner
short
and running
term,
from
it's
our dinner,
okay.
yeah,
But to be locked
not
into
anymore.
sympathetic nervous state 24/7 and hypervigilance is dangerous. It
Hmm.
is not good for your body. It causes ample amounts of problems in immune system issues. And then again, fear, paranoia, distorting reality. It's not good. It causes brain damage, but the brain is plastic. It's neuroplasticity. You can rewire, but it takes cognitive behavioral therapy. It takes other modalities, somatic therapy, and constant mindfulness to pull yourself out of those states of hypervigilance and getting into a state of parasympathetic, which is calm.
And I will say, we are at the end. We're halfway through this list. We can continue this list. Let us know in the comments
Let's do
what
a part
you.
two. Let's do a part two to this
Yes,
because
we
I
will.
didn't realize we had more to go through.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's no, it's okay. But let us know in the comments too what your thoughts, your feelings. We want to hear from you. I
Mhm.
will say though, narcissistic abuse, one, it is very real. And as a psychologist and having been through it, I doubted myself so much. I
Mhm.
had to go to therapy.
Mhm. Yeah, of course.
CPTSD is very, very, very real. And I expect it to be in the DSM on the
Mhm.
next iteration of it. I don't know if it will be, but it should be.
I hope so for the sake of Judith Herman, because Dr. Judith Herman is the one that coined the term and it
I
deserves to be.
see it so much. I understand it. I believe in it. And the best feeling in the world is when you've gone through it and you're done and I mean, there's still times where it's been 7 years. I don't know where the time went that I'm like, oh wow, I've been away from him for 7 years, but I'll still think of things and go, why? And I'm like, no, nope. You are doing so good now. I've gone places where I don't have to worry about what's going to happen. How
See,
is
that's
my,
where your nervous system can reset. Once you get out, you find the peace and your body isn't necessarily, but again, unless you heal the CPTSD, it's really, and you're in that state of constant hypervigilance,
yeah.
right? That's why the therapy modalities are really important. And complex post-traumatic stress disorder, again, a different form of PTSD, is it is absolutely part of being of narcissistic abuse. There's now a term called narcissistic abuse syndrome. Well, it's CPTSD. And it's because it's repeated abuse, right? It's not one singular incident like PTSD is. It's repeated moments of trauma over and over and over, which damages the brain. It's why people who have CPTSD, it looks like they have ADHD, can
They
look
know
like
they look like borderline,
they look like borderlines. They look like ADHD. All have, they can't emotionally regulate, and there can be suicidal thoughts. There can be all these
which is
things.
why borderline. I have like four clients that were said that I was diagnosed borderline. I'm like, I think it's CPTSD. And as we've gone through therapy, it was CPTSD. They are so not. The emotional dysregulation is what people right away will
Right
label
away go to with
borderline.
borderline. But borderline, again, I have one particular client who's borderline and she's so both on the narcissistic and borderline and in such denial and distorts everything and high risk behavior all the time and promiscuity and like smokes marijuana 24/7. Like again, that would be classic borderline personality. But so many people who have been abused by a narcissist or been in a narcissistic relationship will then, because of the complex post-traumatic stress, often be seen or looked at as being borderline personality.
Yeah. And I tell people, and we will do a podcast on PTSD, CPTSD, but I tell people one thing that's different is if you're borderline, it's pervasive all over the place.
Yeah,
Now,
big time.
CPTSD, usually you're not at the grocery store and the cashier says, you owe me $1. You don't, whereas BPD, you
Borderline.
might,
Yeah,
you
borderline rage.
might.
Yeah, and they
Um,
can't be alone, just like a narcissist. They'll find that they jump from relationship to relationship, or
yeah.
they're lots of like a lot of like highly sexual. That you'll see where somebody with CPTSD, they isolate.
The
They isolate
emotional
a lot more.
dysregulation, though,
Yeah,
in BPD is anywhere and everywhere. It
yeah,
doesn't
it is.
matter.
It
There's
doesn't matter.
no,
They're
but
the
with,
fucking person that's like, whoa, what's wrong
yeah,
with them? That was
but
so
with CPTSD,
disproportionate.
it's more in interpersonal
Relationships.
relationships.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we're not going to go to the store and have a meltdown because they're out of milk,
No.
but
Yeah,
we'll be on a
exactly.
date and get rejected and come home and the end of the world.
Mhm.
Because it's us. Because look at, we were horrible in our last relationship. We can't
Yeah,
even
and then
date.
again, so there's a lot of blaming yourself in CPTSD. You'll like constantly where it's like fundamentally I'm the problem and that I've been the issue, whereas borderline it's more of a of the identity disturbance. They don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And they're shifting and they're chameleonizing and they're changing depending on their environment. They really struggle with an identity. Is CPTSD, there's more of a fixed identity. It's more that they self-blame
And
and they
their
think they're inherently the
identity, though,
problem.
has been pushed so far down by the
Yeah,
narcissist
yeah,
that as they're away and they go to therapy and they learn who they
yeah.
are,
They come
I have
back.
clients that I'm just like, I wish I could show you then to
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
Then when you thought you were borderline, and now when you're like,
Yeah. And you
you,
just really think that you're inherently something's wrong with you. As somebody who has PTS or CPTSD, and even my last relationship, the last thing I ever wanted to do was date. It was like, nope, I'm like, you hibernate, you're scared, you're terrified, you can't
yeah.
go there again, you don't want to get hurt, you don't trust anybody. Like people who are borderline can't be alone, just like a narcissist. They have to
Mhm.
be, and they're just dysfunction after dysfunction after dysfunction after dysfunction. They can't hold jobs. They can't, it's so different. But somebody with CPTSD, yes, they can function better in everyday life.
I can't, honestly, this is such a weird thing to say, but I can't wait till it's an actual diagnosis.
Yeah, I know,
I
me
don't
too.
like the term CPTSD because it's complex PTSD that negates PTSD. It's just weird. I think they should name it. And again, narcissistic abuse syndrome isn't good either. There's got to be a different
No,
name.
because
But
CPTSD can be caused by other forms of abuse or
right.
psychological, if it's repeated, if it's psychological trauma and it's repeated. So, yeah, I know again, it's so different than just regular PTSD. It just
It has
shows,
all the PTSD
it does.
plus your
Plus,
changes, your internal everything that you thought and felt
yeah.
is like question.
Yeah. And the rumination is like, again, if you ruminate or if you have flashbacks and nightmares and PTSD, it's more rumination with CPTSD.
Yeah.
But there's similar jargon that's used in there. It's just, it shows differently.
And with women, they usually diagnose it because of the emotional dysregulation as
Yeah,
borderline.
it's borderline.
So if you've been diagnosed recently that you've been in a toxic relationship and you've been diagnosed with borderline, maybe go get that checked out again. To
Yeah,
be
and trust Jody when she says this. I mean, this is just her sort of her thing, right? Um, well, just in diagnostics, it's so easy to misdiagnose.
yes.
Because bipolar disorder looks like borderline personality. Like in a lot of ways, it's easy. There's so many people I know that have been misdiagnosed with one versus another. I have a client in Florida and she is full on borderline, but was diagnosed with bipolar and they can't figure out why her medication won't work.
We're gonna wrap this up, but I
Yeah,
have to say that that is one thing that has come as a blessing from my toxic relationship is
right.
that now I have now like focused into one area that
Yes.
I know very well.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll revisit this again,
Yes.
folks. Yeah, we're going
So
to do this
guys,
this. And then if you guys want to hear more about other
oh, it's your dog. I'm like, what? It's off
stories,
camera. So I'm like,
I
what are you
know
doing? And then she got
it's
on
my
camera.
dog. She's mad
So
at me. She's growling at me because I've been on the computer for too long. I had 2 hours of supervision before this. So anyway,
So, comment. Please like, share. We need 40 more, 42 more to get to 1,000. That is so cool, subscribers. So, like, subscribe, share, comment, guys. We want your comments, appropriate comments. We will even put them in a podcast if you like, if you're okay with that. But we want to know, have you been in a toxic relationship? What do you think about what we have just said? We want to hear from you.
yeah, we do. Yeah, that's the whole point of this, right? This is all for educational purposes, but it's to create conversation and understanding and discussion.
So take care, guys. We still have more to get to. We will do a part two, but
And
we
we'll
will
see
see
you
you
soon.
guys.
Okay, have a good night, everyone.